Luna's Alarm Clock by Ponies. Princess Luna laid in her silky soft bed, covered by layers of comfortable blankets, all of the highest quality standard. Her mind drifted in the vast empty space of sleep, her mind void of all dreams. For her, this was starting to be the best sleep that she had been able to get in the castle with all of the commotion and work that always had to get done. Today would be the day she would get to sleep in for once. Or at least that was what Luna thought. Luna cringed, a high-pitched ringing filling her ears and echoing throughout her chamber. She rolled over in bed, trying to shrug off the irritating noise and hoping that it would soon fade so she could sleep once again. To her dismay, it kept ringing the song of its people continually, showing no signs of letting up. A low groan escaped her as she put a pillow over her head, trying to drown the sound out using the feather-filled pillow. But upon putting it over her head, Luna punctured the pillow, sending feathers to float about. She was starting to get frustrated by the ringing. It was almost as if it were meant to wake her up and keep her from going back to sleep. Sitting up in her bed, Luna lit various candles around the room, lighting it in the early morning dark. With a brief look around the room, she didn't notice anything that could make such a horrendous sound, yet it still echoed loudly. She jumped up out of bed and trotted around the room, checking everything within sight and reach for the source of her suffering. Her search came up empty. Enraged, she threw herself onto her bed, but not without noticing the sound had gotten just a bit louder. Looking over her shoulder, the source of all the madness could easily be seen. It sat on her nightstand, a normal-looking clock that displayed the time, but for some reason it emitted a painfully high-pitched ringing. She sat up on the edge of her bed, staring intently at the clock. "Stop," she told it. Nothing happened, besides making Luna angrier. "I command thee to stop at once!" And using the Royal Canterlot voice, she yelled at the clock, but it just sat there and continued to ring. "Please stop thy nonsense," she asked it, putting her hooves to her face. The room filled with silence, the soundless phenomenon Luna believed she may have never been able to hear again. Luna moved her hooves away from her face, a large grin coming across her mouth. She shouted excitedly, kicking her hooves up into the air. Luna wasn't being all that careful in her excitement. She had managed to tip the nightstand over, sending the clock plummeting to the ground. She stared at it for a moment, making sure that it didn't make the same wretched sound that it once had. After what seemed like weeks, Luna backed off of the object, the ringing soon filling her ears once again. The anger could be seen boiling in Luna's eyes as she stood from her bed, picking the confounded contraption up in a dark blue aura. Bringing it closer to her face, she studied the object, trying to find a switch that would rid it of the monotonous ringing in her ears. There were no switches anywhere on the device, or at least anything that could easily be seen. She dropped it into her hooves and she began to fumble with it in an attempt to accidentally trigger some mechanism that would turn it off. Her anger reached an all-time high, Luna's eyes glowing a bright, sterile white. Hooves started to come down on the clock as it continued to unintentionally evoke anger in the princess. Nothing seemed to be working against the device she held in her hooves, so Luna drew her arm back and threw it with full force against the chamber walls. A small cloud of dust erupted from where the clock came into contact with the wall, but more importantly it had actually ceased ringing for a few moments. This sparked a new hope to possibly be able to live through this predicament for Luna. She picked up the clock using her magic, the casing on it only slightly dented despite the force that had been used on it. Aiming at the wall again, she launched it with extreme force. A bigger cloud of pulverized mortar and stone flew about, but the blasted ringing still echoed and resonated. Furious, Luna walked over to the clock and brought her hoof down onto it a number of times, cracking glass and clanking metal reverberating from the impact. She stopped to catch her breath and take heed of the damage that she had done to it, but all that could have been done was a few major dents and a cracked faceplate. The item had to be possessed by some sort of demon or magic that hated her for whatever reason, and the only other thing Luna hadn't tried against the fabled clock was fire. She looked over to the fireplace, the wood crackling and releasing heat into the room. She grabbed the clock in her hoof and walked over to the fireplace. Her eyes still glowed a red-hot white, a sadistic smile plastered on her face. Staring into the fire, her hopes became greater as she thought of the dreaded noise finally ceasing to exist. Luna tossed it into the fire, the crackling of the fireplace covering the dying noises of the alarm clock. She closed her eyes, and upon opening them, they had returned to normal. The bed seemed much more welcoming to her now that she may actually be able to sleep. She slid into the bed, the silk sheets flowing smoothly over her body. Her mind quickly forgot about the dreaded clock, but it did not forget about her. The ringing erupted from the fireplace, the sound triple the volume at what it had been before. Luna threw the covers off of her body and walked over to the fireplace, dousing the flames with her magic. She reached in and grabbed the red-hot clock with her hooves, not thinking about the heat. She dropped on the ground, giving a swift kick towards the door that led into her chambers after seething in pain. The door swung open, Celestia bolting into the room thinking her sister had been injured. "Luna, sister, is everything—" But Celestia was interrupted by a half-molten clock crashing into her cranium. "Luna, what is this nonsense?" "Sister, thou device hath not stopped its odious ringing," Luna told her in an apologetic tone. Celestia grabbed the clock in her magic, her face incredulous to the fact that Luna had not been able to turn it off. She brought the clock closer to Luna's face, the heat nearly burning her and the ringing in her ears louder than ever. On top of the clock was a single button, and Celestia pressed down on it using a stone she had picked up from behind her. The alarm then ceased to exist, the room filled with the sound of Luna's embarrassment.